I'm calling to order this hearing. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chair of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Monday, November 10th, 2025. The time is 12:15 in the afternoon, and we are in room 412 of the John A. Wilson Building. The subject of this hearing is consideration of two bills. Bill 26-278 entitled Education Report Simplification Amendment Act of 2025, and Bill 26-430 entitled Education Code Adjustments Amendment Act of 2025. Bill 26-278 was introduced by Councilmember Henderson and co-introduced by several other members in April of this year, and Bill 26-430 was introduced by me on October 14th of this year. There's some duplication between the two bills, but otherwise they're similar in proposing to reform reporting requirements. The purpose of Bill 26-278 is to reform and reduce reporting requirements for the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, the District of Columbia Public Schools, the State Board of Education, and the University of the District of Columbia. Specifically, the bill would repeal OSSE's reporting on real estate development, the state board's reporting on school facilities, and DCPS's reporting on annual academic progress and draft technology plans. It also reduces OSSE's administrative burden related to enrollment data, pre-K program quality, residency fraud, and healthy schools reporting. Additionally, the bill revises reporting requirements for UDC's operations and expenditures and OSSE's reporting on the DC Tuition Assistance Grant Program. The purpose of Bill 26-430 is to streamline and revise certain education reporting requirements and clarify related district laws. It adjusts reporting deadlines for the Office of Out-of-School Time Grants and Youth Outcomes, reporting deadlines for the master's facility plan, student attendance, pre-K quality and capacity, residency fraud enforcement, environmental literacy, and school health profiles. The bill also repeals requirements for OSSE to hire an independent contractor for enrollment review, conduct a pre-K capacity study, report on licensed child development facilities that do not participate in the Child and Adult Care Food Program, and report locally on the DC Tuition Assistance Grant Program. Finally, Bill 26-430 clarifies the scope of the school boundary review, the data used in annual attendance reporting, the Military Interstate Children's Compact Commission, and the Research Practice Partnership. The deadline for this hearing in terms of submitting anything for the record is 2 weeks from today. That is, well, it looks like it's 2 weeks from tomorrow, 5 p.m. on Tuesday, November 25th, 2025. I want to add that it's my view that from time to time, it's useful for us to look at reporting requirements, that sometimes we, the council, very easily put reporting requirements into legislation because we think that that actually will help with regard to the legislation. And over time, we see that maybe some of the reports we don't pay attention to aren't necessary, and so it's useful to look at this. The fact that there are reports that are subject to these bills does not mean that the repeal of the requirement will make it to the final committee print. And there may be some reports that will come to our attention that are not in the bills that we think should be repealed. So I see this a work in progress, but today is important to hear from folks with regard to the proposals that thus far have been made to these two bills. Having said that, Councilmember Henderson, you've joined us. Do you have an opening statement?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding a hearing on this bill. The Education Reports Simplification Amendment Act was introduced after I feel like what had been ongoing conversations with both the Deputy Mayor of Education as well as the city administrator about the number of reports that the legislative branch requires and whether or not these reports still have value. Perhaps the information can be found in other places, and perhaps some of these reports are duplicative of information that is already existing. So we had months-long conversation with the various parts of the education sector, with DCPS, with OSSI, with the DME's office about, the full range of reports that the education agencies are required to do, and then a look at whether or not they were still necessary or needed. There were some reports that some of the agencies wanted to get rid of that we did not include because we felt like that information was still important. But, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, I think it's healthy for us to do this type of periodic review to see whether or not these reports still make sense and whether or not they're still necessary, given the change in landscape, changes in technology, and otherwise. So look forward to hearing from some of the witnesses today, and hopefully we can move this bill along. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. So let me call the first group of witnesses. Grace Hu, Digital Equity in DC Education. Melody Malinoff, Digital Equity in DC Education. Alexandra Simbana, who's also with Digital Equity in DC Education. Danielle Robinette, I'm told is online. She's Senior Policy Attorney with Children's Law Center. And Scott Goldstein, who's Executive Director with Empower Ed. I see Grace Hu, I see Alexandra Simbana, I see Scott Goldstein, and you are not Melody Malinoff.
I am not. I am Dan Leistico, but I'm representing Melody and reading her testimony. She's had a family emergency that was pulled her away.
Okay, your name again?
Dan Leistico,
How do you spell-
Leistikow.
First name Dan?
Yep.
Okay. Grace Hu, we'll start with you. I'm going to put you on a 4-minute clock.
Where's the timer?
All around. There
Oh.
should be a clock.
Oh,
in
okay, all
front of
right.
us. There should
Okay.
be one on the table
So I just,
whenever
Okay.
you want to start.
my name is Grace Hu. Hello. I am one of the parent co-leads of Digital Equity in DC Education. For the past 7 years, our team of parents has been pushing for equitable and predictable technology supports for all DCPS schools. I currently serve on the DCPS Technology Advisory Committee. I'm here today regarding the Education Report Simplification Act, which repealed the requirement in the DCPS Digital Equity Act to submit a draft tech plan to council. Our team worked with Councilmember Louis George's office and later Chairman Mendes' office on the language in the Digital Equity Act. Our main concern at the time was to prevent the tech plan from becoming a check-the-box compliance exercise. The language in the bill, specifically the provision on requiring a draft plan to be submitted to council, was meant to enable the process of developing and refining the tech plan to drive discussion on tech policy and budgets at the same time that the executive branch was formulating the mayor's budget, and to provide a lever for council oversight so that council would have an additional opportunity to ask questions and weigh in on what has become a significant more than $60 million per year based on tables in the budget in the tech plan expenditure for the school system. Now, Councilmember Henderson has stated that the purpose of her bill is to reform outdated, duplicative, and administratively burdensome reporting. The DCPS Digital Equity Act's requirement to submit a draft tech plan is not outdated or duplicative. There are still significant challenges with DCPS's management of technology, and we are only 3 years into implementing the act. While we have seen modest improvements in DCPS tech provision these past 3 years, our annual survey of school staff and ongoing discussions with school communities indicate there continue to be challenges with device distribution and access, school-level asset management, smart boards, and internet connectivity. The tech plan is the mechanism for identifying these challenges and outlining strategies and resources to address them. Additionally, DCPS has not provided specifics and evidence on how this requirement is administratively burdensome. We suggest that DCPS figure out how to make the draft plan process more useful and efficient. For the DCPS Technology Advisory Committee, which I serve on, the draft plan requirement is what drives DCPS to share the draft plan with the committee in the fall for feedback. We ask that council put the onus on DCPS to demonstrate burden, as opposed to putting the onus on stakeholders to show why legislation previously passed should be revised. And lastly, on council oversight, Councilmember Henderson has stated that her bill reflects recognition that oversight is strongest when it is focused, meaningful, and aligned with the capacity of the district's agencies. If council wants to provide meaningful oversight of DCPS technology, it should do the following. Check in with key stakeholders on the extent to which DCPS is following through on providing equitable access to tech across all schools, asking if there is sufficient funding to support school technology. The table of multi-year cost estimates in the tech plan provides a starting point for council to ask questions, and holding DCPS accountable for implementing Section 2.3 of the DCPS Digital Equity Act, which requires an assessment of the school tech needs of each school. Without a reliable, accurate assessment of tech issues at each school, the plan is only guessing at what needs to be resolved instead of being based on school level data. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Hu, and thank you as well for your advocacy on this issue. Dan Leistico?
Good afternoon. Again, I'm Dan Leistico. I'm representing Melody Molinoff, who is not able to be here in person due to a family emergency, but I'll be presenting her testimony. Melody, as you know, is one of the parent co-leads of the Digital Equity in DC Education and is a member of the DCPS Technology Advisory Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to share testimony today as you consider the draft submission requirement for the annual DCPS technology plan. I'd like to begin by highlighting that the original legislation, the DC Digital Equity Act of 2022, represented this council's commitment to improving the daily experience of DCPS students and teachers by establishing accountability measures that promote thoughtful, transparent technology planning, ensuring robust technology supports and infrastructure for all students. This commitment isn't just about strengthening our children's K-12 education. It's about preparing them for success beyond graduation. Today, more than 90% of jobs require some level of digital skills, and positions demanding higher levels of digital proficiency pay significantly more. Ensuring every student develops these skills is both an equity issue and an important economic strategy for our city. While we understand the intent is to remove administrative burden, we are concerned that eliminating this step would reduce the opportunity for a meaningful stakeholder engagement and council oversight around how technology supports are planned and implemented for our students and educators. This administrative burden has not been clearly articulated, and since DCPS remains committed to the same review process with the Technology Advisory Committee, the rationale for the change is unclear. I'd like to offer a few questions for the council's consideration. Is the council, in your oversight role, confident that technology resources, infrastructure, and supports are now so strong and equitable across all DCPS schools that we can dispense with the robust planning and review process required by the legislation? If the draft submission and review process were removed, how would DCPS and the council ensure a structured opportunity to provide feedback before the plan is finalized? Intent is not a guarantee of action. It has been suggested that this is an onerous and time-consuming process, but in past years, the annual plan has changed very little from one year to the next or from draft to final submission. In your oversight capacity, we would suggest asking for clarification regarding the administrative burden, since DCPS says they are still committed to a review process with members of the TAC. If the goal is to give DCPS staff more time for engagement, how will the council and the public see evidence that this engagement is occurring and that the community input is being meaningfully integrated into the final plan? In our experience, the plan remains largely unchanged from draft to final submission and does not comprehensively reflect ongoing challenges and solutions raised in the TAC in a specific or actionable way. To be clear, not all challenges and recommended solutions come with a price tag. Some solutions simply require process, communication, and training improvements. However, from year to year, they are not included in the plan, and the same problems persist. Maintaining the draft review requirement helps ensure that DCPS continues its engagement and accountability over time, rather than stepping away from them. Removing this requirement could unintentionally send the message that transparency and stakeholder participation in technology planning are no longer council priorities, and that the current status of technology in DCPS is good enough. Thank you for your time and your ongoing commitment to DC students and families.
Thank you, Mr. Leistico. Alexandra Simbana.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Councilmember. I apologize for my tone and voice as I'm under the weather, but my commitment to this issue for the past 7 years compels me to be before you today. I want to underscore here that I have been a public servant at the city, state, and federal levels with responsibility for accountability and reporting out. I can say with utmost confidence that what is currently required by DCPS is not overly burdensome. I've raised up entire reporting agencies while being the sole responsible party and still meeting the required reporting guidelines and deadlines. Public agencies have a duty of accountability and transparency that is unwavering in its service to the public. As a current member of the DCPS Technology Advisory Committee, known as TAC, I've not felt that the reporting elements that have been met have been met as they were intended by the legislation that created them. There are no clear guides to show the average DC resident or DCPS family what areas of struggle have been identified in their schools or how we plan to address them as a city. There's no clear identifiable information about how many devices we are short by school or how we plan to address schools who struggle with coverage with devices. Even within the TAC, our desire to find information to help build out the reporting information has been met with strong opposition and usually remarks that consider any inquiries about process or methodology as personal attacks on DCPS staff. We have only a handful of parents on TAC who are not DCPS or city employees. We offer this perspective from our school communities and those of families with less access and less availability than ourselves. But any concerns or highlighting of difficulties are met with disbelief and gaslighting of the lived experiences. The TAC and DCPS should have the same goal of readily identifying problems head-on and actively seeking to address those problems in real time, and more importantly, to address issues proactively. Keeping 2 touchstones a year helps keep the council and school communities, which can often abreast of needs that can often change between the draft and the final versions, and when they're submitted regarding additional financial needs or a change in focus due to, God willing, meeting the goals ahead of time. I do believe in efficient government, but lessening the opportunity for more oversight in an area that services our DCPS students in schools is not one that will help our DCPS students succeed. Delays in access or service, the replacement of devices, or lack of internet, all of these are barriers that impede our students' daily learning and in the end could translate in that student falling behind in a class or even failing a class. While a plan is a starting point, it is the discussions that come from the development of any plan that bring more success. My hope is that we place the students' needs paramount at this time over the reduction of administrative burden. I think our children deserve our time and attention to their needs. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have a copy of your statement. If you could submit it, please.
I'm sorry, Chairman. As I said, I've been very sick,
Sure.
so I will send it over.
You have 2 weeks.
Thank you, sir.
Danielle Robinette.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, members of the committee, and staff. My name is Danielle Robinette, and I'm a senior policy attorney at Children's Law Center. Any reporting requirement must strike a careful balance between public transparency and administrative burden. As the council reviews the bills before you today, we urge you to consider not only how the council uses these reports, but how that information is used by DC families. Regarding attendance reporting, B26-430 makes small but important changes to the annual attendance reports. While my written testimony provides greater detail, we support the proposed amendments. Regarding the Healthy Schools Act, both bills before the committee propose changes to the publication requirements for school health profiles. Current law requires OSSI to post school health profiles on its website within 30 days of receiving the information from schools. B26278 would require OSSI to publish them by March 15th of each year. B26430 would require quarterly publication. As the committee considers the possible changes, we encourage you to reflect on the purpose of gathering and publishing school health profiles. The committee report for the Healthy Schools Act notes that this requirement was included in the law to increase participation in school wellness programming by making sure families were aware of all that their school has to offer. The original intent was not an accountability tool for government, but an informational tool for students and families. Given the significant staff turnover and program changes that occur throughout a school year, school health profiles should be updated more than once per year. Over the summer, the school nurse may change, or a school may partner with a new CBO to provide behavioral health services. If school health profiles are only updated in March of each year, the information may be inaccurate for most of the following school year. Therefore, we support the quarterly reporting requirement proposed in V26430. Focusing on the public utility of school health profiles also highlights the need to improve the current publication system. Imagine a parent seeking the name of the person at their child's school who could administer medication to students. This information is included in the school health profile, but it is not easy to find. The parent must know to search for the school health profiles page on OSSI's website, find the most recent survey responses for their school, then scroll through a 30-page PDF to find the needed information. This is not exactly user-friendly. Luckily, the district already has the infrastructure to make school health profiles more accessible. DC Health operates LinkU, a referral platform through which residents can find support with food, housing, transit, among other things. CFSA uses this platform as part of their 211 Warm Line initiative. And most recently, DC Health and DBH are now using LinkU to create a publicly accessible and searchable online directory of available behavioral health services in the district. This same platform could be used to publish school health profiles. OSSI would continue to gather the information from schools, but could then partner with DC Health to publish the information on LinkU. The council and the education sector have invested significant resources in health and wellness programming for students. Improving accessibility of school health profiles could finally fulfill the Healthy Schools Act original goal in creating the requirement. Moreover, expanding cross-agency integration of this platform could improve resource coordination across government. For example, OSSI School Health Profile Questionnaire includes several questions about behavioral health programming and staffing. As such, school health profiles could help landscape the current state of behavioral health resources in DC schools, which would in turn allow DBH and the council to better understand outstanding needs in this area. Thank you for this opportunity to testify, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Robinette. Scott Goldstein.
Good afternoon. I believe this will be my shortest testimony ever. On the whole, I support the Education Report Simplification Act because I don't want our agency leaders duplicating work and focusing on duplicative reporting. They shouldn't spend their time constantly doing compliance that isn't helpful to our goals. And as teachers have testified so often, neither should teachers. If agency leaders would like the law to prevent them from duplicative busy work, perhaps they will couple this advocacy for this bill with efforts to get rid of duplicative busy work required of teachers. But I do agree with advocates we must protect critical reporting that ensures digital equity. But when it comes to many of the other measures mentioned here, like the state board reporting on facilities, I do think it makes sense. I commend DCPS for the new reporting exit surveys. That's something we asked for. It's very useful data and we need it regularly. While I largely support the streamlined reporting this bill produces, my one request is that these agencies get these reports turned in on time. It should be in the law, in DC code, when critical reports must be turned in and there should be accountability for missing deadlines. I've heard a lot of reasons why they say they can't, but it doesn't make common sense to me that, for example, a report on teacher retention from the previous year can't be produced by October 1st of the following year. Please put that in law along with the critical elements that it must maintain. If they need to release initial data and go back and make small amendments, that's fine. But delaying by months and months and months because they're verifying every data point provided by schools is not the right balance. The same should be true of tech plans, absenteeism data, and more. Let's streamline reporting, but let's get it done on time, much more than we currently do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. So all of your testimony is helpful, and we will be looking at it more closely as we decide what to do with the bill. I appreciate that the folks from Digital Equity are reminding me of the legislation we passed a couple of years ago and the reporting that we spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out. But as I said at the beginning of the hearing, I look at this as a proposal for what reports to consider, and where we end up with the committee print isn't necessarily where we are with the bills as introduced. Mr. Goldstein, you bring up this point. There should be accountability for missing deadlines. What would that look like? I mean, I would be happy to defund an agency for being late, but I happen to know, for example, there are a couple of reports that I've been interested in that the agency finished and they languish I'll put this diplomatically, they languish in IQ for a couple months. So it's not really the agency. So what would accountability look like?
Trying to decide what to say here. You've been very creative in your mechanisms with other agencies as you look at the broader budget picture. For example, discussions with the CFO and city administrator and others over the last couple of years. And I think you've built a toolbox for agencies. But I think one thing is there are things that I think we've had this discussion many times that you hesitate to do legislatively. And I think for good reason, because you want to let the education professionals run education. And I think this is one of those points where I think the accountability is that we'll have to do some additional things through legislation if we're not getting the data we need to know. Look, if we have the transparency in the front end and we know where we stand on an issue, we don't want to necessarily come in and micromanage it. We understand where your strategy is, we know what our data is, and we're going to let you run the strategy. But I think if you all as oversight don't know what the data is, I think it's more compelling reason sometimes to actually get in the weeds and legislate, because you can't see there's a clear strategy to get where you think the outcomes need to get. And so I think I would say there's the balance between oversight and legislation on a lot of these topics, as we've talked about with several measures related to teacher retention before. And last thing I'd say is there are other mechanisms that aren't reports where things get put out. Like I was thinking, as you mentioned, the health school profiles, like the state report cards, the school report cards, right? Where I think there's a process we go through every couple of years to revise that. There's more information that could be put out to the public in different venues that aren't just reports.
Right, I'll leave it there. Councilmember Henderson, do you have any questions?
Thank you. Thank you to this panel of witnesses. I first want to say I believe in technology and digital equity, and also for those who may be watching who might not get the nuance of the bill doesn't get rid of the technology report. It gets rid of the pre-report to the report. And if anybody was looking for the pre-report, it's actually not something that you would find on the DC Council website, because the only thing in LIMS is the actual final report that is sent, not the pre-report. Mal, my understanding is that the pre-report, it was to be shared with the committee, who helps to advise on this, and then also shared with the council. The burden part comes is that they're fine to share it with the committee and have those conversations before they submit the final report. Sharing it with the council requires an additional layer of review and information that then it doesn't even get published to the public. So if you were to ask me today, what was the difference between the pre-report and the final report, I actually wouldn't know that, because that's not something that is available for us on LIMS. So we're just trying to figure out those pieces. I'm not trying to get rid of the pre-report, but I don't think it's something that needs to be turned into council, but you feel differently, yes?
Yes, I just want to offer some background as to within the TAC, as members of the TAC, we are often pushing for information, and we're often told, well, that's going to be in the draft. It's not ready for you to view until the draft is ready. It's not ready for the draft. And then we are presented it with a very short turnaround time to provide any feedback. Most of it is not accepted. But then it's always this looming thing, like, you know, we can't share it with you yet because we're working on the report. Where a lot of this should be much more transparent. If we are truly an advisory, which we are not working as an advisory and haven't been since the creation of it, we should have readily available a lot of this information. Also, we should be feeding into that information from our school communities and reporting out, here's what, you know, there are different reasons the information isn't getting to central office, good, bad, or sideways. As TAC members, we want to make sure that we're lifting up all schools. We can only know that when we know what information central office has. And more often than not, we are anticipating the draft as much as possible, because we know that they have to comply with it. And without that deadline, I don't know that we would ever see that information.
Okay, that's helpful for us to know. It does seem on its face like a level of micromanagement that we do for no other agency. There's no other, like we've looked through every single reporting requirement that we require in education. We do not require other agencies to submit a pre-report to the report. We just asked them to submit the report. But the background and context is helpful, but I think it speaks to a larger issue separate from the reporting.
The larger issue-
Not the commission.
The larger issue is we've only been implementing this Digital Equity Act for 3 years. If the Technology Advisory Committee were effective, if we were making transformative improvements in DCPS technology, I think we'd say, sure, we can remove this requirement, but we're not. And so we're saying the existence of this requirement is a forcing function. It's a forcing function for DCPS to share their draft plan with us before they send it to you. It's a forcing function for council staff to ask questions about an expenditure that costs more than $60 million per year. Now, if current council member staff are not asking questions upon looking at that draft plan, I think that's an oversight issue. Saying is that requirement is a forcing function. We learned about this hearing because they told us in late October, because I'm sure they want to be able to tell you that they had spoken to the Tech Advisory Committee. So often it's you inquiring or you getting something that's a forcing function for stakeholders to learn something because they want to be able to say, oh, we consulted with the Tech Advisory Committee, oh, consulted with the stakeholders.
Okay, I hear you. I'm just telling you, I've seen the final report. I've never seen the pre-report, and perhaps staff has shared it. But if somebody were to look it up today in the council limbs, there is no draft report. It is just the final report. So, but I hear your testimony where you're saying that there is a function, but I just want to be clear for folks who are listening. I'm not anti-technology. It is just something that is a very unusual requirement that we don't have, but you're specifically saying there's a particular purpose for that. Mr. Goldstein, thank you so much for being here. And Ms. Robinette, thank you for being here as well. It's so funny because I think that so much of our issues with reports and otherwise could be solved by its presentation. And if we could just find it when you're looking for the thing. And that is a different question, not necessarily for these agencies, but one that I've had for the Office of the Chief Technology Officer for quite some time, which is when are we getting these website redesigns so that data is presented in a way where people can find it, as opposed to having to dig through so many different areas to look for something, or have to know what you're looking for and know exactly where to go to find it, to see where it is. I think that there are lots of agencies that frankly have so many FOIA requests, not because of lack of transparency or you are hiding information, but literally folks don't know where to look. It exists, but they don't know where to look because we're not presenting it in a positive way. This bill doesn't solve that, but this bill hopefully, I hope, will start with us getting some reports in a more timely fashion, and some more meaningful reports. Because the worst thing for us is that when I get a report that is 3 or 4 months late, and then it's only 3 pages, and it doesn't even answer the question they were supposed to ask, I feel like that's a waste.
So if I can, because you reminded me of the Chief Technology Officer, a lot of our education agencies have, if you look up something very basic, searching for a report, all the previous ones come up, right? It's very hard to find the latest.
Yeah.
And I would say, for example, OSSI has done a good job with this. For example, where if I look for the educator workforce report, there's 1 page and it has the newest one, then the previous one, which is great. I'd say on the DCPS pages, some other pages, you look for it and the previous 10-year versions are still there as live pages, even though there's only 1 updated version. It's very hard for the public to get information they want.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember. I don't have any other questions for you all. Thank you very much. We'll turn to the government. Marissa Goldstein, who's Deputy Chief of Staff in the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Education. Andrew Gall, who's Deputy Chief of Staff for Legislative Affairs and Policy in the Office of the State Superintendent for Education, otherwise known as OSSI. And Abe Kleeman, who is Deputy Chief Intergovernmental Affairs, District of Columbia Public Schools, otherwise known as DCPS. I think Abe knew we were calling him and he got out of here as quickly as he could, but when he comes in, if somebody sends him to the table. Ms. Goldstein, you're first.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Henderson, members of the Committee of the Whole, staff, and members of the public. My name is Marissa Goldstein, and I serve as Deputy Chief of Staff and Director of Legislative and Governmental Affairs in the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Education, or DME. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on B 26-278, Education Report Simplification Amendment Act of 2025, and B 26-430, Education Code Adjustment Amendment Act of 2025. The two bills under consideration today propose several small shifts to DME reporting requirements that our agency supports. We are grateful for the investments Mayor Bowser, the DC Council, and district residents make in our education system year after year. With this commitment of public dollars and trust comes a responsibility to inform policymakers and the public about the state of our schools. The DME does this in multiple ways. Every year, the DME publishes the Public Education Master Facilities Plan, or MFP, which provides the strategic vision for public education infrastructure in the district, with an eye to addressing current challenges and promoting long-term sustainability. The DME also produces an annual MFP supplement to provide interim updates on facilities and to estimate expected public school enrollment in the future. Every 10 years, the DME also produces the Boundary and Student Assignment Study, which provides a comprehensive review of DCPS boundaries and feeder patterns and public school assignment policies. DME maintains the website edscape.dc.gov, which provides detailed analyses and data visualizations that support program and school planning based on the district's population, public schools and facilities, enrollment patterns, and neighborhood factors. The Office of Education Through Employment Pathways, or ETEP, which is housed within the DME, will help us assess the impact of education and workforce training programs on participants' career outcomes. Launched in 2024, ETEP has already connected data from 5 government agencies in order to generate insights on labor market alignment of UDC's programs, early career outcomes for DCPS and public charter school graduates, and access to career technical education. Beginning next year, ETEP will produce dashboards for policymakers and the public to understand outcomes across our K-12, post-secondary, and workforce systems. These examples are just a handful of the ways the dedicated public servants in our agency work to democratize education data and provide actionable insights for stakeholders. We appreciate their diligence in this work, as well as the Council's shared interest in maintaining transparency while identifying opportunities for increased efficiency. I will now turn to the two bills under consideration today. 3 of the bill's provisions would streamline how the district reports on the uses of public school facilities. B 26-278 proposes repealing 2 provisions that require OSSI to publish an annual real estate portfolio review and require the Board of Education to provide an annual update on all activities related to public school buildings and grounds. These requirements, which were put in place before our current governance structure was established in 2007, are now captured by the Master Facilities Plan, which provides extensive analysis on programmatic capacity, utilization, modernizations, education specifications, facilities conditions, and environmental testing. B 26-430 would formally exempt the DME from producing a Master Facilities Plan supplement in the same year that the full MFP is published. The supplement covers the same topics in less detail, and this proposed change would bring the code into alignment with current practice. B 26-430 proposes making a small change to the focus of the Boundary and Student Assignment Study. Current code only references DCPS as the focus of the study. The proposed change would formally reference DCPS and public charter schools, which together make up our strong 2-sector public education system. Although DCPS will continue to be the primary focus of the boundary study as the only local education agency in DC with geographic boundaries and by right schools, this addition reflects the fact that other student assignment policies, such as common lottery preferences, impact both DCPS and public charter schools. Both the original 2014 boundary study and the 2023 boundary study recommend the city consider the full ecosystem of public schools when assessing whether new schools are needed. The most recent boundary study's recommendation 23 directs the DME to, quote, work with DCPS and the DC Public Charter School Board to create an aligned and transparent planning process for opening new schools and campuses and identifying grade configurations in both sectors that considers the full ecosystem of Washington, DC's public schools, unquote. The implementation of the boundary study recommendations are already underway, and this shift in language recognizes the work that DME, DCPS, and the DC Public Charter School Board have already taken on to improve coordination and coherence. B 26-430 would also move the date of the annual report published by the Office of Out-of-School Time Grants and Youth Outcomes from November 1st to December 15th. November 1st comes 1 month after the end of the fiscal year, and this small change reflects the additional time needed to complete the report after the end of fiscal year close. Finally, B 26430 would allow agencies to enter into sole source agreements with the DC Education Research Collaborative for up to $100,000. Currently, contracts for projects valued under $100,000 are awarded to the lowest bidder. This approach to contracting can mean that generalists are selected for projects when it would be more advantageous to engage a consultant with specific expertise in education research. This proposed shift could also speed up the procurement process and help agencies begin projects sooner. In closing, we appreciate the Council's interest in exploring opportunities to streamline reporting requirements. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Goldstein. Andrew Gall?
Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Henderson, staff. My name is Andrew Gall. It is my distinct honor to serve as Deputy Chief of Staff for Legislative Affairs and Policy at the Office of the State Superintendent of Education. I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony on Bill 26278, the Education Reports Simplification Amendment Act of 2025, and Bill 26430, the Education Code Adjustments Amendment Act of 2025. I will begin by saying thank you. Reviewing existing requirements and seeking efficiencies is not a common or celebrated legislative activity. Reducing administrative burden does not generate accolades from advocacy organizations or the press, but it does help government to work better. So thank you to the sponsors of these bills and your staff. OSSI largely supports these bills and the provisions therein. They reduce OSSI's administrative burden, align reporting deadlines with our data collection processes, and eliminate outdated requirements. For the sake of time, I will not detail all areas of agreement, but to highlight 2 examples, we are pleased that Bill 278 consolidates OSSI's 3 annual pre-K reports into a single submission, and we appreciate that Bill 430 removes an impracticable provision from our pre-K reporting requirements. That being said, there are a few provisions we would like to align with Council on in advance of passage. Specifically, OSSI would like to maintain the current November 30th deadline for our annual attendance report. In partnership with Octo and the DME, we are currently developing a public-facing attendance dashboard, which should satisfy Council's desire for more timely access to attendance data. Our annual attendance report provides high-quality, in-depth, and actionable quantitative analyses to inform policy and practice. Shortening our reporting window would erode our ability to conduct these valuable analyses at a time when chronic absenteeism continues to be a significant barrier to academic achievement locally and nationally. In addition, in 2007, Council added Chapter 27A to Title 38. This chapter, which contains 4 separate sections, pertains to DC LEAP, a scholarship program that ended in 2011. Section 2734 contains outdated and unclear reporting requirements on DC LEAP and DC TAG. OSSI encourages Council to repeal the entirety of Chapter 27A, or at minimum, the annual reporting requirements contained in Section 2734. OSSI would also like to ensure there is one clear annual reporting deadline for our agency to post school health profiles to our website. Currently, the Healthy Schools Act requires OSSI to post school health profiles on our website within 30 days of receiving this information from schools. This rolling deadline creates an unnecessary administrative burden for our agency. We collect this information from LEAs on an annual basis, so we encourage Council to adopt a single annual deadline of March 15th for OSSI to post this information to our website. Finally, in Section 10 of Bill 430, we seek a technical change to ensure we do not accidentally increase the administrative burden on our environmental literacy staff by changing the frequency of the district-wide environmental literacy plan from triennial to biennial. In addition, there are many other reporting requirements OSSI would recommend amending or repealing, including a reporting requirement for the Child Care Bureau, an agency that was subsumed by OSSI nearly 20 years ago. The Selective Service Report, as OSSI's funding for this work was removed in FY25, and the requirement to annually publish the UPSF algorithm on OSSI's website, since the UPSFF breakdown is easily available in DC code. I look forward to working with you and your staff to further eliminate outdated, duplicative, and administratively burdensome reporting requirements, and I am optimistic that this legislation can serve as a template to seek further efficiencies in government operations. Thank you again for taking on this unglamorous topic and providing me with an opportunity to testify on Bills 27-8 and 430. I'm pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Gall. Abe Clayman.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Henderson, and staff. I'm Abe Clayman, Deputy Chief for Intergovernmental Affairs at DC Public Schools. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today about legislation that would change reporting requirements for DCPS. DCPS is committed to providing the public with useful information through regular reporting in a transparent way. For example, DCPS provides comprehensive information about school budgets each year at budget.dcps.dc.gov. The public can access detailed information about school enrollment, lottery offers, and wait lists at enroll.dcps.dc.gov. We publish an annual educator exit survey report, a comprehensive student technology plan, and an annual attendance report. DCPS maintains a profile page for each school with contact information and insight into specialized programming, academic performance, and enrollment. And DCPS collaborates with the Office of the State Superintendent of Education and the Deputy Mayor for Education to provide additional reports on enrollment, attendance, student discipline, facilities, and school budgets. Publishing reports annually is no easy feat. Thank you to everyone at DCPS and other agencies who contribute to reports that go to the public and the council. Council members and staff, thank you for considering ways to streamline reporting, reduce administrative burden, and make this reporting more useful. DCPS generally supports the legislation being considered today. I will speak briefly on each and offer feedback where appropriate. First, B26-278, the Education Reports Simplification Amendment Act of 2025. This legislation would repeal the requirement that DCPS submit a draft technology plan to the council for review and comment no less than 2 months in advance of the final report submission. DCPS supports this repeal. The technology plan explains DCPS's technology strategy for the upcoming 4 years. DCPS regularly incorporates feedback from a formal Technology Advisory Committee, or TAC, throughout the year. 44 parents and educators representing all 8 wards serve on the TAC and meet monthly with our technology team to provide feedback on the technology budget, implementation, professional learning, support to schools, and other areas. Our team shares a draft report with the TAC each fall for feedback. Removing the requirement to submit a draft report to the council would streamline reporting and remove repetitive processes. DCPS would still engage with the advisory committee and provide them with a draft report in the fall. In fact, we would have more time to focus on engagement and implementation instead of reviewing the plan twice. In addition to modifying the technology plan, this legislation would repeal the requirement that DCPS submit an annual report delineating students' readiness for kindergarten and 4th grade. DCPS supports this repeal. We assess student readiness for the next grade through classroom observation, social emotional development, and academic performance. DCPS already provides the public with robust readiness data through the DC School Report Card, performance oversight hearings, parent-teacher conferences, and through school reports from online learning platforms. These methods provide timely and actionable data for the public, and we do not believe an additional report is needed. Next, I will turn to B26-430, the Education Code Adjustment Amendment Act of 2025. This legislation would change attendance reporting to include more information about the number of students who are chronically absent from school and efforts taken to reduce absences. As Chancellor Farabee testified in October, regular school attendance is critical for student success. We support this change. DCPS recommends the council consider further changes to attendance reporting that would clarify metrics for the public and reduce administrative burden. Currently, DCPS, OSSI, and the DC Public Charter School Board each publish separate attendance reports and include slightly different metrics. OSSI has also testified that it will provide the public with an online attendance dashboard, which we support. With the dashboard in place, families and stakeholders would encounter 4 different sources of attendance data each year. We believe it would be clear to have attendance metrics reported annually by OSSI and to remove the requirements in DCPS's report that are duplicative. This would allow the public and the council to read one annual report that explains public school attendance in Washington, D.C. We look forward to working with this council to discuss attendance reporting further. In addition to the legislation under review today, DCPS recommends one further change. Each year, DCPS prepares a report with supplementary information about capital projects. This document is referred to as the PACE Supplement, after the Planning Actively for Comprehensive Education Facilities Amendment Act of 2016. Currently, this document is separated from the annual Capital Improvements Plan submitted to the council by Mayor Bowser. We recommend amending the law to incorporate the PACE supplement in the CIP submission, ensuring a unified and transparent view of facilities planning. Thank you, Chairman Mendelson. Thank you, Councilmember Henderson, for holding this hearing. By streamlining reporting, the council can help DC's public schools stay focused on our most important mission, educating the students of Washington, D.C. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kleeman. Thank you, each of you, for your testimony. Mr. Gall, your statement prompted a couple of questions from me. Why March 15th for the school health profiles?
There are currently 3 dates in the legislation or in code.
Well, I
There's-
understand the rolling deadline is a problem.
Okay.
I understand that, but why March 15th?
So according to the code and in practice, schools submit their school health profile data to OSSI on February 15th. There often is some missing data. We provide some data validation, make sure that schools have all the information that they need, and then we put it on our website. So that process of providing feedback and uploading the information to our website takes approximately a month. So that's why we would encourage a March 15th deadline.
And with regard to environmental literacy, you want to change that from every 3 years to every 2 years?
So there are 2 elements in this part of the code. One is referencing environmental literacy plan, and then the other is environmental literacy reporting. So the actual plan is right now required triennially. We don't want to change that we would like to retain every 3 years. The report, though, is one of 6 data elements in Healthy Schools Act reporting, including farm to school initiatives, share table participation, compliance with health and PE requirements, student achievement on health and PE standards, environmental literacy, which is the one I'm talking about, and school gardens. So of those 6, all of the other 5 are right now a biennial requirement. And so we just want to align this environmental literacy to also say biennial, because we just put out one big report every 2 years that hits on all 6 of these reporting requirements. So it's just a technical change.
Got it. And then you say you look forward to working with us to further eliminate outdated. Do you have any other reports in mind?
Yes, I have a list of 2 dozen reports. I don't know that I will go through all of them right now, but I'm happy to talk about a couple with you if that's all right.
Maybe a couple and then give us the list.
The Healthy Tots Act reporting, there's which is part of the CACFP report, which is also amended in your bill. There's also 2 other provisions in there. And if you look at 38283 subsection A3 and then subsection C, that we don't complete, as these are, A3 is a requirement that would require vast expansion of resources to do the data collection, and we don't, we are not resourced for that. And then C is largely phrased as a one-time report, although so it was completed one time. We believe it is that is done, but eliminating that requirement would eliminate the ambiguity there. So there's some just additional Healthy Tots reporting cleanup that I think could go on. Maybe I'll just pause there. There are lots of other, there are also 8 one-time reports that are currently in code that we have already submitted and already completed. That would not necessarily have a practical impact on our work, but would just clean up the code a little bit.
Okay. And then in your statement, you also say you would like to keep the current November 30th deadline for attendance report. You heard the sigh. I mean, November 30th is, help me here, 3, 4, 5 months after, 5.5 months after the end of the school year. Now, I totally get that you want to do a lot of scrubbing of the data, but on the other hand, we would like the report to be closer to the end of the school year. So we get reports from DCPS in the summer, though that one came late, but I think you all had finished it and it got lost in IQ. That's a diplomatic way of putting it. And we got the report from the Attorney General maybe in July, and we got the report from the Public Charter School Board in August. And then OSSI comes ambling along 4 months later, 3 months later.
I certainly hear the desire from you for more timely attendance data. This is something that Dr. Mitchell is also passionate about. That is why she has instructed us in coordination with the DME and Octo to develop a public-facing attendance dashboard. Admittedly, all LEAs already have a LEA-facing dashboard, so they're able to view their attendance data on a daily basis, and they're the most important users of these data, but we also recognize there is a public interest in these data. And so this attendance dashboard will satisfy council's desire for more timely data. That being said, I do want to maybe illuminate a little bit of the timeline. And then, so there are 6 LEAs that serve schools on a year-round basis. So they have an extended school year. So they're actually do not end school months in advance. They end schools on, we certify their attendance data on October 5th, and rather August 15th. Then we internally do our calculation of attendance growth and chronic absenteeism metrics through a metric calculation confirmation, and we share that back with LEAs. So we shared that back with LEAs on August 26th of this year, and then LEAs have approximately 3 weeks, so until September 19th, to confirm those calculations. And then they have 5 additional days to appeal. So that means that this year we closed our attendance data on September 24th. If we were to move the attendance report up to October 1st, as the legislation suggests, that would give us 1 week to clean the data, to analyze the data, to write a report, to get the report through our interagency report review process. And that doesn't set us up for success in terms of meeting that deadline. I will also just say, these analyses that we do are conducted by really, they're really in-depth analysis that are important to our broader LEA stakeholder community. For example, in last year's report, we showed that early dismissal days, people were absent 4.5 percentage points more often, and that was even higher on Fridays. When we shared that out with our LEA community, we heard back changes in practice where LEAs shifted. Instead of having Friday early dismissals, they had Wednesday early dismissals. That means more kids are attending more school, and I think that I understand the desire for more timely attendance data. The dashboard will do that, but having that window to do that in-depth analysis is worth that little bit of weight.
Not sure I'm feeling it, but let me ask Mr. Klayman and Ms. Goldstein, are there any reports not included in these 2 bills that you would want struck?
Not on the DME side explicitly, but there are other agencies in the DME cluster who are not at this table today who I think would be interested in a review of their reports. So we'd be happy to talk to their committees if they're so interested.
So like DOES, but what about education agencies?
I think we have, all of our education agencies here. I think for the Public Charter School Board, my understanding is that the majority of their reports are largely coming from for Public Charter LEAs. My understanding is most of the requirements actually come from OSSI and the Public Charter School Board rather than council mandated reports. I would certainly invite the opportunity to work with your staff and confirm that. But I know that OSSI and PCSB are in the process of internally reviewing their reports, kind of in a similar process to streamline, remove duplication, and allow LEAs to focus on their key work of educating young people and not just producing reports. So that is underway.
Thank you. Mr. Klayman.
Yes, we think there are 2 that would be beneficial. One is the streamlining of attendance data so that the metrics around attendance live either on the dashboard that OSSI is discussing and will produce, or on OSSI's report. We think right now there's a duplication between the DCPS report and the OSSI report. If you look at the DCPS report, there's these long tables that detail how many students missed 1 to 5 days or 6 to 10 days at every school. We think that kind of a metric and that calculation would be captured in the OSSI data that's either part of the dashboard or part of their final report. So that's one. And then I think number two is the change to the PACE supplement. We think a small word change in the code would ensure that that supplement is not a supplement, but rather is included in the capital improvements plan that Mayor Bowser submits. So that would remove essentially a separate report, but rather say to the public, here's the capital improvements plan, here's the information you requested about swing spaces, here's the information about maintenance, and so on. So those two, I think, streamlining attendance and PACE supplement are places we know right now. I think we'd be happy to look at others. I think there's an interesting conversation about educator retention. I think OSSI does a tremendous amount of great work on educator workforce report. We also have an exit survey report that is named an exit survey report, but that's really just one of about a dozen tables that we provide in it. And so I do think, there may be some duplication there. I think we've gotten some good feedback on the educator exit survey report, so I'm not suggesting we get rid of it, but I think there is potentially a conversation there, and then we'd be happy to look at others. We can always look at more things to get rid of. I hope we do this again in a year or two.
Okay, maybe not. Don't hope too much. Councilmember Henderson.
Yeah, let's not hold off hope on that. When I became it was my 5th year as a council member. I believe year 1, I started asking questions about reports because the DME at the time had concerns. And it took 4 years for anybody to take me seriously on the requests to tell me what reports were problematic. Mr. Kleeman, these are not my questions, but I know the conversation that you were having there with the chairman, specifically about the PACE report. So we have a bill coming on PACE, an update, but there is nothing in the law that says that DCPS can't submit the supplemental information at the same time that the budget is submitted. It's y'all who gives us the supplemental data 3 to 4 months after the fact, but
Hope you understand what I'm saying. Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Just
Sure.
if you guys want to submit it all at the same time and the mayor submits the CIP, by all means, that is originally how we wanted the information to begin with. But it is always late.
Well, I think number one, I think it's good to make sure that we're hearing that directly from you. So I think we appreciate that. I'm sure I know we've heard it before, but again, to hear it here is important. We do want to make sure the public has a clear picture of facilities. We spend a significant amount of funding on this. There's always questions about swing space. We want to make sure that's getting out there. We work very closely with the Office of the Chief Financial Officer to submit, to transmit, and to publicize the budget, including the capital improvements plan. And I think we've done a lot of good work on making sure that budget is more transparent. You can look on our budget worksheets, a number of other places. This change from current practice, where they're separated, has not really risen to the level of a priority in terms of that partnership. And so we think clarifying that rather than updating the PACE supplement, but rather that it should be included. So a simple one-word change would very clearly communicate that is the expectation.
Okay. I do have some other questions. So this one's for OSSI. So it's my understanding that OSSI would prefer a full repeal of the DC tuition assistance grant reporting requirement rather than a revision, excuse me. So current federal law requires OSSI to report specific information regarding DC TAG. DC code requires that OSSI annually report the enrollment status and graduation rates of each student who receives funding from DC TAG. In conversation with OSSI, we initially discussed the possibility of repealing that requirement since federal and local requirements might seem duplicative, but ultimately we decided to enhance the reporting requirements because it's important that we have insights on what's happening with the DC TAG program, which institutions students are gravitating towards, how much the institutions have received. And we're also aware that this current presidential administration is not necessarily the biggest fan or even understands what DC TAG is. So the federal funding portion of it is a bit uncertain. So if you want to walk me through why you guys are in favor of a full repeal and but for the local reporting requirement, where would we find the information?
Yes, happy to. Thank you. So OSSI is proud to work for our work on administering the DC TAG program and is committed to transparency in its administration. This is why we publish an annual slide deck on our website with a wealth of data, and I can provide you all those data points if wanted. We also provide council robust reporting on DC TAG through our annual performance oversight responses, including graduation rate, which is one of the requirements currently in the law. The other is enrollment status, which I think is a little bit of a confusing phrase. We're not exactly clear on what that means exactly. Maybe that's part-time versus full-time. I'm not sure, but we do report part-time versus full-time publicly as well. So I will also say this area of the code is a little bit confusing. The entire rest of the chapter is about DC LEAP. And then there's this one paragraph in this broader chapter that references DC TAG. It took me actually multiple times of reading this section of the code to actually even understand what it was saying. I initially thought that this whole section was about DC TAG. I had to go back and read the underlying statute to realize, oh, eligibility students means DC LEAP. So I think there's a level of lack of clarity there as well, and we think that what we do in terms of public reporting through performance oversight, through what we put on our website and annual data decks are sufficient and appropriate way to provide transparency into this important program.
This is the one though why I'm like, okay, yeah, duplicative. I feel like it is important for us. If we were to get a question from a member of Congress around DC TAG, it is easier for us to hand them a report that is already put together, as opposed to saying, here, check question 56 of the performance oversight report's responses that were sent by the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, right? Like in some cases, it has a secondary need and value than just for the traditional public, but like it is us needing to sort of cover ourselves, if you will. All right. My time is ticking. Okay. For DCPS, so our bill would repeal DCPS's requirement to submit the annual report for the preceding academic year, delineating students' progress and readiness to the council and the mayor. It's like a very wordy situation. So we made this amendment because there are other sections of the code that mandate a similar type of report while using the same amount of data. Mr. Clement, you guys, I believe DCPS supports this amendment. Can you talk about what this data was used for historically and why you guys are in favor of moving on?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So I think we we want to make sure people know how their kids are doing at school. We want to make sure the council is aware of students' readiness, and these are critical grades. I don't want to underestimate that at all. We just feel that with the DC School Report Card, performance oversight data, parent-teacher conferences, and what kids can and what families can access online, they have sufficient information. I think in terms of past uses, in full transparency, I don't believe this report has been submitted in the past 6 years. And I'm not sure beyond that, but I can at least say for the past 6 years, it has not been. This data is really gathered both at a system level, but ultimately principals are making decisions about whether to promote or retain students in pre-K or in third grade, as the case may be.
Okay. This whole conversation kind of makes me think about, in terms of the council needing to be better about how we store the performance oversight data and information that we have available to us in a way that can be readily accessible to the public. Because it is a trough of information, and a lot of that started the old education committee in particular, because it was our only opportunity to truly get data out of the education agencies. And so we required literally everything under the sun to essentially create our own repository of information, if you will, because it wasn't available on the OSSI website, or it wasn't available on the DCPS website, or the DME didn't have that information. But now we need to better store that, because we do have, I would say, well over a decade worth of information that might actually be very interesting to folks. Okay, so you guys heard the testimony from the folks from the Digital Equity Advisory Committee. And, in the bill that I drafted, I initially got rid of the pre-report, but they do have some pretty compelling testimony in that the requirement of the pre-report seems to be the only hook, if you will, for DCPS to actually engage them in any real way. I want to give you an opportunity to respond.
Sure. So we really do value the feedback that the TAC provides. I want to be really clear. There are 44 members on the TAC that include teachers, principals, other staff at schools, educators, and yes, parents. I believe there are 8 parents currently on the 44-member TAC. And so we want to get that feedback. The law right now requires us to engage with the TAC. It requires us to solicit their feedback, and the plan should be is required to incorporate that feedback. And so I think if what we're trying to get rid of or remove is the requirement to submit the plan to the council, because as you said, that requires a different level of review than providing a draft plan to an advisory committee. I mean, frankly, we engage with the principal advisory board, teacher advisory board, parent advisory boards, and we present them with information all the time. For example, when we did our student cell phone policy, we did not present them with the final policy, but we said, here's what we're considering doing, or here's what we're planning on doing. What feedback do you have? And then ultimately the policy was released to the public. And so we definitely want to consider that, continue to get that feedback. We generally have been providing the draft plan to the TAC either at the end of October or in mid-November. But we think it would be better to be able to do that and not have to review the plan for the council's eyes twice.
Okay. Is DCPS on track to have the 26-29 technology plan submitted by February 2026?
We are. And we would, and I think we would actually be able to get more feedback, I think, from the TAC if we weren't also engaged in this review process. So I think it would allow us to get more involvement.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I have like 3 more questions. Okay. So Section 3 of our bill repeals OSSI's, quote, public school enrollment census reporting requirement for the year subsequent to January 1, 1999, since this report has never been published, or at least we can't find it. So the code required that independent contractors perform a census of the enrolled students separately from the enrollment studies completed and submitted regularly by the superintendent's office. So we received feedback that this requirement was unnecessary. And my understanding is that each LEA reports enrollment data directly to OSSI. So there isn't really a need for DCPS to hire independent contractors to validate and track this enrollment, correct?
That's correct. Although OSSI does hire an independent contractor, but we don't think the language that exists there now in the code is necessary for us to do that. If you wanted to add, OSSI shall verify the accuracy of LEAs by hiring an independent contractor at the beginning of subsection 180402.
Okay.
D1,
I think
we're open to that.
We want the third-party validation, but I don't feel like each LEA needs to go out and find a third-party validator to do their enrollment counts. All right, cool. Okay, residency fraud. So Section 5 of the bill amends the reporting deadline to report on the status of residency fraud investigations to be due on September 15th rather than July 31st. We are suggesting an amendment on this based on feedback that OSSI generally doesn't have the available data by July 31st, which essentially means that every single time you guys have submitted this report, it was late. Mr. Gall, my understanding is that there's some confusion around the 30-day extension and that OSSI would actually prefer an October 15th deadline as opposed to September 15th. Can you say more?
Correct. So we do not have the program. The programmatic data is finalized on August 15th. So then we need to do additional levels of review, then write the report, submit it to our interagency review process. So that whole process will take approximately 2 months. So we would support just a simple October 15th deadline.
Okay. This is more of a general one for all 3 of the agencies, just to capture sort of the scope. So, right, we only looked at reporting requirements just for the education agencies. The Secretary of the Council's office periodically we'll send around a list of every report that is required in the code to all of council staff. And some of them are, you know, dormant, if you will. There used to be this reporting requirement that DCPS had to report that textbooks were delivered on time, which I think was a one-page report, but it had a purpose at its time. And whether or not DCPS needs to continue doing that is a question. Have you guys looked at how many reports you're asked to produce each year, your agencies? Just curious.
In preparation for this hearing, I think we did look pretty closely. I don't want to speak entirely for my colleagues, but we did look pretty closely what we have to provide, and I think that's where the list of other things
Yeah. How many?
came from.
Just curious. How many reports is DCPS producing each year?
I mean, I would say a few dozen
Okay.
overall, and if we look at the full universe, those are not all directly to the council. Some are just public or published for the public on our website. Some are presented to OSSI or to another agency.
Yeah.
A few dozen, yeah.
DME?
Thank you. We have 4 annual reports. We have 1 report that's due every other year. That's in conjunction with OSSI. We have 2 reports that are due every 10 years. So that's the boundary study and the master facilities plan. And then the school funding study is due every 5 years.
Okay. What about OSSI? I mean, local, not federal. I know obviously you've got federal reporting requirements out the wazoo.
53 local, about 150 federal, but
53 local reports.
yes.
Uh-huh. How many FTEs work on reports?
I don't have that number for you.
Okay. Okay. So it's just something to keep in mind. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that you held a hearing on this today. I know that there are other clusters who want to have this conversation, or other agencies who want to have this conversation about reporting requirements. And I think it's probably incumbent upon us on the council side to do much better of when we're imposing new reporting requirements to see what is already required. So we're not layering on top of each other, but hopefully this seems like a common sense bill here that hopefully we can move forward to. But thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. So what happened to the textbook reporting requirement? Did that get repealed?
I haven't looked into that. I would have to look back and check on that.
Do we think it's still in the law? I remember. I think it came from Councilmember Orange.
We'll get back to you about that.
Please, because we could add that to the list.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to go back to DC tag. So why eliminate DC tag reporting entirely? The federal report doesn't require the same information that the local requirement is.
So we have never actually fulfilled the local reporting requirement. So when Councilmember Henderson rightly is saying we want something that we can be able to send, what we do is we create a data deck with all the information that anybody could possibly want, and we put it on our website, and we're happy to share that with you or Councilmember Henderson. The local reporting requirement is only 2 things. One is enrollment status, which, like I said, is an ambiguous term, but if it means part-time versus full-time, we do report that publicly. And the second thing is graduation rates. Again, we report that every year to you in our performance oversight responses, and I believe it is also in our public deck, but I can double check that for you. So it is duplicative and doesn't add anything to what we are already reporting publicly.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of missing something here. So if we were to repeal the reporting requirement, all that there would be is the deck, as you put it, that's on the website, which you are not required to have.
Correct. And there's nothing, we have not been fulfilling any local reporting requirement on DC tag other than through our performance oversight responses.
Well, that's an answer. And I did have a question here of how many FTEs are associated with reports, and you said you don't know offhand.
Correct.
Um,
I would say broadly that most of our reports it's just one part of a larger bucket of work. So when we have someone diverted to, or when we have someone working on the pre-K report, there is also tension with for example, them drafting regs on our pre-K programs, right? There's multiple jobs that individuals do. And so alleviating some of these reporting requirements would alleviate some of the burdens on these individuals and free them up to be more creative in terms of their times and finding solutions that would benefit DC.
I want to go back over the attendance. So when do you get the attendance data from schools? That is, you have all that you need. And when I said schools, I mean LEAs. Is that end of July, middle of July? You get a daily feed.
Correct. So if we are including the 6 extended school year LEAs, we do not receive that data until August 15th.
Okay, and then you go over the data, and how long does it take you to go over the data before you send it back to the schools?
We send it back to the schools in a week, so we sent it back on August 26th of this year.
And then you give them 3 weeks.
Yes, so they had until September 19th to certify the metrics, and then they were provided 5 days to appeal. So they had until September 24th of this year for that data to be finalized.
And then you need a month and a half to be able to write the report.
Yes.
And then it gets lost in IQ for a couple of years. Give me a second. Bill 26-430 suggests removing the requirement for schools to report how many SSTs they hold, and instead report how students' attendance improved post-SST. The theory being that we should measure outputs rather than inputs. What's your view of this, other than that, of course, the less reporting, the easier?
So this would essentially trade one reporting requirement for another. We currently have to report how many we held. This would say what happened to attendance. So, and we think, attendance is so critical. So we do not oppose this. I do want to caution that our ability to sort of determine from that number that the SST was the critical mover in terms of kids' attendance, I think that is somewhat limited. So there may need to be some discussion afterward. I'm sure there would be at our annual attendance hearing, but we do think that SSTs are an important tool. And so reporting on what happens after an SST, we take no issue with that. And just on the textbooks note, if I may, there is a requirement that the the superintendent shall certify to the Board of Education that each new student has been issued textbooks. This was a law that was written in 2002, so before an OSSE superintendent existed and prior to the elimination of the Board of Education. So this is, I think, maybe another place to look where there are some requirements where it's a little bit unclear what who's got the ball, let's say.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I just looked it up in the code. The last textbook certification that we got though was in 2015. So somebody at DCPS was doing it.
Well, maybe there've been no new school books since then.
I don't know. It was exactly 1 page.
We've heard from charter schools that OSSE and PCSB are asking for a lot of similar information at different points in the school year. What are you doing to reduce these non-legislative burdens on LEAs?
Thank you for the question. Yes, so one of the great joys of my work is I get to work closely with some amazing leaders in education here in the district, and working with Dr. Mitchell. I know one of her guiding values is listening to LEA feedback and being responsive. This was one thing that was brought up shortly after she was confirmed as the permanent superintendent, and she made a commitment to look at this. And so we have, over the summer, spent time looking at all our reporting requirements that we ask of LEAs, and we've met with PCSB to identify all of their reporting requirements. We identified 14 general areas of reporting requirements, and we are now in the process of further meeting with PCSB to see how we can align to minimize the burden on LEAs. So we hear that feedback, and we are doing everything in our power to make sure that we are not overly burdening LEAs, so that they can spend their time educating our children and doing what they do best.
Thank you. Give me a second. I think we're out of questions for the moment. If you have other reports you want us to consider, please feel free to submit. I want to thank each of you for your testimony. I'm going to wind down this hearing. This has been a hearing on two bills, Bill 26-278, 26-430, both dealing with reporting requirements. The record in this matter will close at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, November 25th, 2025. Time is